Hi, I'm Jessica Dodge. Welcome to my studio. Today I'm going to show you the last couple of steps to my reverse oil painting on glass technique. What I've done here is I have all of the black outlining of my essential drawing done with oil paint. It is fully dry. I have used a single-edged razor blade to scrape away what I don't want, and I have taken a cloth with mineral spirits and cleaned up all the areas that were smudgy. And now we're ready to add the color. Okay, typically what I do is I start with the lightest colors, because the rule of painting on glass is that whatever hits the glass first is what your viewer will see, because they're viewing from the other side of the glass. So I start out with my highlights, so I want to hit this little highlight in the middle. Oops, my little frame is gone down there. Okay. And then we want to do a little edge here of the beak. Alright. Take this out. Then I'm going to, so every place that I've left to have light on it, I will hit with just a little bit of this white here. And I don't know if you're close enough to quite see it, but I've scraped out these little areas that are just a little bit more cleared away and bright than the other spots. Okay. Then, moving up the line, we go to something a little bit more in the yellow zones here. Okay. And we're going to go get the little legs here. Right. Now the thing to be thinking about, and often a question I get, is how much am I going back and forth and looking at the front while I'm painting the back side? And the truth of it is that I really rarely look back and forth unless it's a very highly complicated composition. This is a fairly simple one, so for the most part I'm just going to be working on this side and not keep turning it back and forth, which would be, you know, a little cumbersome in this format of us doing it on film. So the majority of the time that I'm creating a piece goes into the black lining of it. I like the feel of it. It feels to me almost like a block print or an old style, you know, lithograph with the scratching back and the adding to. And that can take many hours or days or weeks or even months, depending on the complications of the overall composition. Okay. Alrighty. So next, I'm going to do a little something here with some of these feathers. Typically, what I like to do is I like to fill in the main figure first, provided that there's a central figure, so I'll usually do that first. Now, this is a little, I believe it's a nuthatch, but I'm just going to play around with the colors. I'm not worrying about them being true to the actual bird species that I have painted here, because it's more fun that way, and that's just the way I'm going to do it. Okay. And now I'm doing something that's more of a wet into wet. So if we have this initial color that I put in, and then I rim it with this rosy color, and then I bring some of that rosy color up into it with sort of a spiking effect, which you'll see later will show up as a little bit of modulation. And it's, you know, it's important to try and make sure that you fill in everything, because it'll show up as black or darker or a shadow once we seal up the painting. So you want to try and fill in as much as possible, although that will be addressed more completely later. Okay. And even places that look like they're just solid and black, they have little scratches through them that I've made with my trusty single edge blade. And so you want to make sure you get some color in there so that it spreads and gives a little bit of juiciness and liveliness to those areas. Then this is part of the challenge of this, is that now, as you can see, the more it gets covered up, the more you can't really see, I can't see where all of my detail is. So I just have to trust my initial calibration that I've done when I first laid in the colors, laid in the black outlines. So the design, I have to trust my design. Because at this point I am just not painting blind exactly, but painting within the parameters of what I've set for myself. Sometimes I like to bring in a little brightness here, so that will help to give some volume and roundness to certain areas. And then we want to give one little look more to make sure we've got all the areas covered, and we're done. Okay, so I've now turned around the piece so you can see what the finished bird looks like. So this is the idea, that whereas on the other side we had what looked to be, you know, a painterly bird situation. And now you can see how the black line defines, and then you have the color coming through. Okay, so now we're going to work on the tree trunk and branches. And this is going to be a little bit more loose, and kind of, because we want to have, not only is it one, you know, long stretch, but also I want to have the sense, I like to have the sense of the painterly, because the defining dark lines are so almost graphic, you know, like a graphically created or printed. But I have a really great love of the painterly as well, and so it's really, once again, we're going to start with the lighter colors. So you want to bring the sense of the brushing into it. Very important, I think, because that keeps it fresh feeling, and so it doesn't have that static sense of it just being a gravure, shall we say. And then all of this later on, at the end, at the very end, I will do some sort of mooshing around. That's a technical term, mooshing. To get these different aspects to really blend. But you can't really do that part till all of the elements have been filled in. So, once again, trusting my own original lines. See how there's this sort of sense of, now the sharp black lines underneath, of course, will be cutting across this nice painterly smooshiness, but Those two elements together is part of why I really love this style of painting, this technique, this media. When I was in art school, my painting teacher used to say, because I loved both the very crisp graphic line and I love painterliness, that she didn't feel that there was a way I could reconcile these two loves within my work. But when I discovered this particular medium, this is what really was able to make these two parts come together. So it's one of the reasons I've continued to do it as long as I have, which is now coming on maybe 37 years that I've been doing this kind of work. Or actually, possibly even longer than that. No, that's about right. Okay. The person that I first learned how to do this from was a young man who had been a literature student of my mother's, and he also was a wonderful painter. Gary Curtis is his name. And he started out painting on sashed windows, and I also did, because they were, being in art school, canvas is expensive, and you can just get old windows anywhere, so they were really great. They were already framed. And this part, he was a great proponent of doing everything just in 2 hours, or a couple hours, is however long it took to cover the glass. Because of course, as soon as the glass is covered, then, other than adjusting that paint, and it is greasy, I like to use the oil paint. Some people do use acrylic. I don't find it as satisfying of a look. And he would even, he would paint wet into wet, so his outlines would still be kind of wet when he painted in his colors. And that's how I started out also, back in the mid-'80s. But then, one day, I'd done my underpainting, the black part, and I'd let it dry. Just, I had something to do, and so I wasn't able to get in there and paint the color. And when I came back, it was all crisp, and it held the look of my drawing, and then I was able to put this wonderful color on top of it, and I just fell in love with that look, that approach, and I haven't looked back ever since. That's what I've been doing. Okay, so now the next thing we're going to do is take care of these leaves. Now they're just solidly black, so I'm going to essentially hit them with a variety of greens that will give a little bit of a modulation. Okay. So they'll have little dark centers, but they will, because there is some scratching in there, they will have some sense of this color that will shine through. And one of the reasons I love to use oil paint is because oil paint is made from real mineral, and it has its own almost luminous quality to it. If you ever, whenever you look at a canvas, you can see that the paint itself has this sort of personality. But when you view it through the glass itself, the glass has its own luminosity. It has its own prismatic effect, being made of glass. And made of sand that it's being ground into, and so it has this really wonderful double effect of the prismatic gleam from the glass, and then the mineral in the oil paint, which gives it, as I've said before, this sort of luminous quality, as if it was backlit or lit from within. Now, it's really important, at least for the kind of work I'm doing, that you don't actually backlight this, because, as you can see, it just sort of becomes, like smeary. It doesn't have the luminous quality that you'll see once we turn this around and it's all done. And I'm going to work on this a little bit more here, and then do the next. I'm going to start the next phase that's going to be a little bit more tedious to watch, so I'm just going to start that phase, and then we're going to go, we're going to jump ahead to filling in the next part, which will be the sky, after I do this extra leafy bits. Okay. It's good to make sure you get up into the corners. Don't forget little areas that you may have not quite seen. There we go. Okay. And now often, in order to give a sense that there's another part of this tree leaf going on, we'll often put in this other color that reflects off of, is sort of a secondary complement to the greens I've already used. And then I'll take a rag and carve in there these little echoing leaf shapes, so that we're essentially making kind of like a soft bed of leaves that are twinkling behind them. Okay. And I also have this really great little tool, which is actually used for pottery. It's like something that you would use to carve into your pottery, or to make shapes in it, and it works beautifully with this stuff. So we'll just continue to do that, and then we'll come back to the next part. Hi, here we are with the filled in foliage of the tree. I'm just going to show you from the front side. So we've got the tree and the branches, and now all we have left to do, aside from the final adjustments, will be filling in the sky behind this. So back to this side. As you can see, part of the reason, just by the limitations of our technology right now, of what I'm doing, I would normally be holding it up and looking at the front as I put in the background. But for the purposes of ease, we're going to just do it like this, and then I'm going to turn around and show you. Okay, so now I've covered the entire glass, and the important thing about painting on glass is that whatever you put down first is going to be the first thing people see, and then whatever you pile on the back, that will just sort of hold up your original. So initially I had all of that black line work, and then I filled in everything. So essentially there's no more, unless I take something away, that can be added. Now it's only a matter of adjusting or modifying what I already have here. So we're going to turn it around and see how the lines that I initially set in and let to dry give the structure, and then back behind, then we have all of the color giving it more volume and more play. So the final thing I want to do is modulate some of this area to give it a little bit more interest and depth. But otherwise, I would consider this pretty much finished. I might do some tweaks here and there, looking at it over some time, maybe lighten up some areas, maybe add a little bit of, color here and there. But for the most part, I would consider this almost done. And what I'm going to do now is, I'm just going to do this for you with the camera showing, so you can see how it's very creamy. So you pull in this, I'm going to sort of lighten up this area, and then here's one of the things that happens is you have, see this light, the orange there, that is coming from that bird beak. So I come back in, wipe that away. So a lot of the process now will be of adding and subtracting as you bring the color and the feel back to what you want it to be. And why I didn't do all this direction from the beginning. A lot of times I have to use my finger, just kind of soften that up, bring it right up to that. Now you can see when I tip it forward here, see how it's sort of streaky? And this is one of the reasons I always, put a back on it. Many times people have asked me about, putting up to a window or having light come through it, but as you can see, it's like completely streaky and kind of loses its structure and its sense of solidity. So I'm going to take this light that I have and I'm going to spread it around here, bring it down. But I don't need to worry about losing the structure of my bird because the outline has been completely dry for a long time. But I can bring this down. It is all very wet. It's very wet into wet. So that just kind of brightens that up there. Okay, and I'm going to do this in another little spot just to kind of pick a little spot kind of randomly, brighten up a couple little areas here so we don't feel like we're just in a one kind of monochromatic space. Because we want to have this feeling of filtered light coming through the trees. Okay. And let's give it another little look. This looks a little bit overbalanced there, so I'm going to add a little bit more here. It's light. I'm just doing all this with my finger into these little areas. All right. Okay. And there you go.